All right, what's up, everybody? It's Friday, March 8th, and we have an emergency segment because we want to cover what the All In podcast said last week about abolishing HR.
Emergency.
So first off, shout out to Cassie, who was like, you guys have to do a segment on this topic. She was right. All right, let me set the context. So the All In podcast is the #1 business podcast in the world. It's 4 guys who have generally been very successful in Silicon Valley, most of them like CEOs and investors. And then there's Jason, which is, I always give him a hard time for that. Anyways, here's the context on this segment. So where they led off was with Shaun Maguire. And Shaun Maguire is a partner at Sequoia Capital now. And he's been having these subtweets for a couple of months around his experience at Google. He worked at Google Ventures. And finally, last week, he came out and said the thing that he's been wanting to say publicly for a while. This is his direct tweet, which is, it's from his manager at Google who was talking to him. He said, "I'm not really supposed to tell you this. It could get me fired. You're one of the highest performing people here, but I can't promote you right now because I have a quota. My hands are tied. You'll get the next slot. Please be patient. I'm really sorry." Again, that's Shaun Maguire, who is now a partner at Sequoia Capital. This is what caused him to leave Google to join Sequoia. So Shaun is insinuating that he should have gotten promoted, but didn't because he's a white male. So this is what spawned the conversation for the All In pod last week. And Chamath came in and said he does not have HR at any of his companies where he is in majority control. And he believes HR should be abolished. And so a lot of the discussion in the pod was about out of control DEI, unbundling HR and recruiting into each org and having the org leader run it. And then the HR person having become like the company police officer, or as David Sachs said, the commissar. So Kelli, what's your take?
Well, yeah, look, I think it's easy to get all fired up about this. I had people text me, "Did you see this?" And just like we do on the show, I think we have to double click into why they're saying what they're saying. Because if I think about that, Nolan, I actually fucking agree with the why. I do. I mean, we talked about this in a lot of sessions, right? The DEI kind of rules that have came out. I'm not surprised at that stance from Google. I've heard it before myself in different ways. And I don't think it's bad intent. I think it is lazy, and I think it is reactive to a issue and a challenge and a problem that's going to take years. So I think it's a very lazy, hey, here's a rule, don't promote these people to do it. That's just not the right approach. It is lazy, and it's a policy to do things that we should be working hard that take years, minutes, time, conversations, reflection. That's all the hard work, right? It's like therapy or not. And I think it's a lazy reaction. I don't blame him for leaving. So that's on the Google piece. I'm frankly more interested in the abolishment of HR. I think that's very interesting. So I was listening to him, and it's so funny because what he was saying, basically, he's, in my mind, what I took away is he's saying the leaders should basically be HR.
Correct.
Like my objective view is strip the fucking title, strip the person, if you will, or the box in the org chart. But what I'm saying is that the work of this function will never go away. He's just giving it and decentralizing it to business leaders who are capable of doing it. And so I just think it's a little trite to be like, we should abolish HR, because it's really not. It's abolishing the function, and it's farming it out and trusting business leaders to do it.
Yeah. So I guess all right, so let me respond, and then I want to get your take on it. I think you're right. That's exactly the way he's describing the abolishment of it. So let me just start with what I agree with. I think this superficial marking based off immutable traits is not healthy. I have personally been told this hire needs to be insert race or gender. I have heard that inside of companies. And I think that's been part of the problem. And I think that's part of the reason why you're getting such pushback. The other thing I agree with that they were talking about is HR teams will be a lot smaller in the future. And I think we're going through some of this change right now. I think what they're missing is like, every HR leader we've had on the show has said something along the lines of HR should enable the business to move faster and perform at a higher clip. And so if you think of the metaphor of like, if the business is like a Formula One car, HR is like the oil that keeps everything lubricated to go really, really fast. And, the way I think about great HR, great recruiting is we should be operationalizing the culture.
Yes.
And you do this by ensuring that the values and the performance bar is upheld, reinforced, and then consistent across the entire org. And so what Chamath is arguing for is, hey, let's decentralize this. Let's unbundle it and put it into the hands of basically the exec team. And look, I've seen this, and the problem with this is it becomes fiefdoms. And so then you have, exec, call it CTO over here and exec finance leader over here, and they view their bars entirely differently. And then when their teams try to work together cross-functionally, there's a ton of friction.
Totally.
Versus, I do think as it relates to culture, it should be like a top-down, this is the way that we are building this company, and you can either sign up or you can vote with your feet and leave. The other thing I think HR teams should be doing is eliminating bias. And I know what's immediately going to happen is everyone's going to say like, for the people who listen to the show is like, they're going to think race and gender. And of course I mean that, but I also mean time bias in hiring. Every single hiring manager wants to make a hire as fast as possible because they have a hole on the team that needs to be filled. And I think time bias in hiring is the ultimate way to get hires wrong. And so HR and recruiting should be doing their job of ensuring like, oh, I don't know, this one meets our bar. And that's actually like where great conversations are happening in the hiring process. Similarly, in performance reviews, right? You get proximity bias of like, well, this person's been amazing for me. Well, the finance, the CFO told me they suck. And so like, we shouldn't be promoting, it's just rounding out the gaps and covering blind spots.
Yeah.
So what's your take on that, Kelli?
I think what Chamath was saying, I do agree with. There are all types of different diversity, right? There was example, hey, if you hire all your sorority sisters or fraternity brothers, so be it, which I think was a very silly example. But Chamath came back and said there are all types of diversity. And I know, race and gender is very important and they're necessary, but they're just not sufficient. And I think what he's saying is we have over-indexed on that only to a point where you have Google making these crazy rules around it. And they're just using those very wild examples to highlight that, which I agree with. Race and gender are necessary, not sufficient. So I think the theme for me is it's much bigger than a certain piece of it or whatnot. I mean, I lose my mind every time, and I hear it still all the time. They're not a diversity candidate. Like, what the fuck are you talking about? They're a human being. Every human being is diverse, but what are you accenting for? What type? Like,
what are you optimizing for?
Nolan's not a diversity candidate. I mean, you probably got all sorts of things that are, we'll go into that later.
A lot of issues, but
you got a lot of issues, But anyway, I think that's while we should strive for representation, saying that and accenting to a certain point is dangerous, and it's just not complete. Hey everyone, we'll be right back in a moment after a word from our sponsors.
There's a world where your CRM is powerful, easily configured, and deeply intuitive. Attio makes that a reality. Attio is a radically new CRM built specifically for the new era of companies. It's flexible, easily configures to your unique data structures, works for any go-to-market motion from self-serve to sales-led. Attio automatically enriches your contacts, syncs your emails and calendar, lets you create powerful reports, and quickly build Zapier-style automations. The next era of companies deserves more than a one-size-fits-all CRM with an outdated UX. Join OpenAI, Replicate, 11 Labs, and more. Try Attio instantly at attio.com. That's ATTIO.com, and tell them Nolan and Kelli from HR Heretics sent you.
Now, the HR piece, I think, again, I had the same reaction you did, and I can't believe I agreed with you, is I think it is, and you say this all the time, that's a utopian, that's a wonderful dream to be able to outsource this and only have legal firms that are vendors deal with all the shit. Like,
totally, especially the growth company.
Yeah. I mean, again, I got a rash listening to this because that's a wonderful idea. But if you think you're going to outsource hiring or these high stakes things to all different functions, and you're going to, one, get quality, consistency, fairness of process, and most importantly, above all that policy stuff, consistency in the type of people you're coming in to match your culture, right? That's the glue I'm talking about. And you used oil in a car, and I'm using glue. The role of HR, whatever you want to call it, I think the title will change at some point, by the way. The role of HR isn't rules, policies, and legal stuff. Again, that is the floor. It is the glue, being the glue in these organizations and architecting that culture in ways that are consistent, that can scale, and are optimizing the business. That is the role. And that's what he's saying that he wants business leaders to do, which is fine. But I've yet to see a company where those leaders can be that glue around that architecture. And that is a skill set that I think is very important. And I think it's been minimized in this conversation.
It's really interesting because there's this notion of DRI, the directly responsible individual. Essentially what Chamath is arguing for is that the DRI is everybody. And in my experience in business, when the DRI is everybody, it's nobody. And
or it's like complete chaos.
That's what I mean. Yeah, that's what I mean. Is like who actually owns this fucking thing?
Yeah. Either it doesn't get done or it gets done in like wildly different ways that are more disruptive to the business.
That's what I mean is like, that's why I love the Formula One car analogy, because like there's so many moving pieces in a business. And if we're going to go as fast as we possibly can in the same direction, we need to have all of the pieces together. And we need to have the lubricant to make sure that there isn't friction and we're not internally fighting with each other, which does happen in business. It happens in relationships and life. So, my take is over the last 5 to 10 years, HR has swung this pendulum really far to one side of the spectrum and optimized for things that are not in the best interest of the business, that are instead in best interest of quotas. We've talked about this in the past. But this is the natural reaction that you're seeing now from business leaders who are the people that sign the checks saying like, I don't want this shit in my company anymore. And if there is HR, it's now thought of as this like administrative function and like go sit in the corner and run my benefits. And, for me, it's a sad state of affairs that it had to like go this far. To now you're having like, again, the most important business podcast, the most listened to business podcast in the world saying we should abolish HR. Yeah. They haven't experienced good HR. And this is a call to action to great HR leaders to step up in this moment and to say, no. My job is actually to enable the business to move faster, to achieve our goals faster. And that's where I think this is ultimately going to go is quotas are going, they're gone. And now it's going to be about how can we enable the business to move as fast as it possibly can.
Yep. I mean, and my takeaway was let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater. Like if you've worked with shitty HR leaders, like let's not assume everyone's like that and find the good ones. I think
be that person. Our listeners, be that person.
Be that person. Be the change. This is why I think a lot of business leaders, CEOs are tapping on business leaders to come into this role, which is fine. I don't care what you call it, who it is. The work is important and the work needs to be there, or else I think at scale, you're going to be like, oh shit, what just happened?
Things are breaking.
And a funny example, I loved when he said, get an external law firm, just outsource all that stuff. They shouldn't be knowing the intimate details. And I agree. Everyone, if you don't have like an ORIC or a backstop that you can call on when you're in trouble, big mistake. If you're using that as your HR partner for every little fucking thing that comes up, you're out of your mind. Not only is it unreal. Yeah. Can you imagine, Nolan?
Yes,
you're looking at the bottom line. Oh, by the way, here's a bill for $10 million at the end of the year. Because someone looked at someone wrong and you called ORIC. No. And I laughed also because, they shouldn't be knowing those intimate details about things that happened. And you have to. if you're the employer and you're going to make a termination decision based on an investigation you've outsourced, you're going to be like, you're fired and I don't know really what happened. Outsource as much as you can. But that glue and that oil in the company in this role, no matter who it is or what you call it, I think is imperative.
Amen. And just quick shout out to Jessica Perry at Oric, who is awesome. And then Dan McCoy at Fenwick, who are like my two favorite employment lawyers on the planet.
Well, if we're doing that, I'll shout out Jim McQuaid out of Oric.
Yeah, I mean,
love you.
They're just like the best. So, but I do
Oric
agree with
paying
that.
us for this? Oric's not paying us for this.
Yeah, right. Okay, so here's the story is like, we want your feedback on this. I think this is going to be a topic in HR for the remainder of the year, because this is where business leaders are at with their level of frustration. So please share this with your friends. Please comment, like, let us know what your thoughts are. Kelly and I are going to continue to have these conversations and looking forward to hearing from you all. Thanks.
Thanks all.
HR Heretics is a podcast from Turpentine, the network behind Econ 102, Moment of Zen, and Turpentine VC. Subscribe, 5 stars, share it on Apple, YouTube, Spotify, anywhere you get your podcasts, all the things.